My name is Ash Chawla. I'm here to present a quick presentation just because we had a chance here to let everyone know what industry thinks about it and how it impacts the industry itself. Um, I'll just give a quick introduction about ourselves to start with. We are a project management company, a well engineering and project management company. So we look after all aspects of drilling, all aspects of fracking, completions, and everything. So that's our specialty. We have experience and capabilities of successfully executing projects in unconventional, conventional coal seam gas, shale, and coal and mineral exploration divisions. So our clientele includes most of the oil companies in Australia. We are working with one of the companies here in Northern Territory as well. We have a lot of assets in Central and Northern Territory. We have 4 business units: well engineering, drilling advisory, field operations, and commercial. So we had a few hours to go through the paper that we received through yourself. It goes, the risks being considered are water, land, air, public health, impact on Aboriginal people and their health, social impacts, economic impacts, land access, and regulatory framework. As far as going through the document, what we saw is all of these risks are mitigatable. There are controls that are required around those risks, and the risks are there are risks in fracking, but not something that we cannot mitigate. Lot of the risks that were in the documents relate to fracking shallow wells, which is more like coal seam gas wells, where there are issues with integrity of the wells, and the water actually gets. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous at the moment, but.
Thank you.
So there are risks in shallow fracking. We acknowledge that, and there's a lot of shallow fracking happening in Queensland. But what I believe, what we are looking at here is quite deep, which is 1,000 meters plus. I don't think there will be anything less than 1,000 meter up here, knowing what we have in Northern Territory. Most of the frac depths will be quite deeper. So water, land, and air are perfectly fine in terms of if we have good well integrity and good practices of drilling, we can all avoid those risks. There's no public health risk that I see. There's disposal of the water that needs to happen, which is done in Queensland as well. Queensland have some. The industry itself actually has some good working practices to work around these kind of things. So the chemicals used nowadays in fracking are not at all harmful in such a way that they will actually harm and cause public health issues. Impact on Aboriginal people and their health. I believe again there's some control issues here. For impact on Aboriginal people and their culture, it should say actually. I think Queens and the Northern Territory government needs to come up with some sort of restrictions where we can drill, not closer to anywhere close to cultural sites or something, or give or take X many meters. But I don't think that this will affect any impact on Aboriginal people or their cultures at all. Social impacts is kind of similar to the impact on Aboriginal people. I think social sites or all the other social impacts can be mitigated easily. There's huge economic impact if we do not frack. Obviously, we all have seen Total pulling out recently, and there's other few companies like Territory Gas and other companies that have number of investors ready to go in, and they are just stopped because of this fracking moratorium at this stage. There are huge economic impacts, so that needs to be considered as well. Land access, I think the way that it is staged at the moment, Northern Territory does it well. Councils work on behalf of TOs, and companies have their own regulatory people to work with regulators. I'm happy to take any questions in terms of any engineering side, if there are any from yourself. Or
What we propose to do is let you finish, and if you can finish within sort of the next 15 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to questions from the panel.
Controls. I believe to mitigate all those aspects, we need to have some tighter guidelines. There needs to be a code of practice for drilling frac wells. There's in code of practice, it generally goes through well design and integrity guidelines, minimum criteria for frac candidates, like casing isolation, proving that there's casing behind cement before anyone even proposes frac on that particular well, or the government approves the frac. Third-party review of drilling program and completion program as well. So there needs to be an independent review of all such frac completion programs or drilling programs as well, to make sure they go through all the regulatory and industry practices, and the wells are drilled in such a way that they would not impact, and they have all the controls in place. List of allowed mud chemicals and frac additives. It will be good to have a list of additives that the fracking companies can use, rather than they putting their own mixture in. I think it will mitigate a lot of things like health issues, all the environmental issues as well. Recording and reporting of data. What happens on site gets recorded and reported. Multi-level engineering plans monitoring by regulator. So I believe regulator, if regulator can like in South Australia, what we submit gets accepted based on if there are any problems later on, then the company has to come in and fix them. But I believe a better way of working is a regulator actually getting a third party involved to approve those, or have someone in the department to approve these engineering programs. That's pretty much me. We only got, as I said, a couple of hours to go through the material and put up a presentation.
No, thank you very much. That's very useful. You'll make that presentation available to us in due course?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You talked about the third-party monitoring before the approvals. Did you envisage then the approvals being granted by the department, or are you suggesting just a wholly separate body that's separately funded and wholly independent from the department?
Well, I would suggest having an independent engineering company does help. Talking about us, we are an engineering company as well, and we work with number of operators and number of companies in number of different states. So we know what's coming into the market and what problems are going around. We're quite, into it in such a way that we are time-wise, it's pretty good. So that's why I think it's necessary to have a third-party independent company to be involved and to assist the government in the approvals.
So you wouldn't be in favor of just a wholly independent, separate regulator?
Well, wholly independent, separate regulator will need to have an independent engineering department which goes through all these controls. We wouldn't be against that.
questions from the panel? We'll start from that. Yes, Professor McCabe, thank you.
You mentioned the need for tighter guidelines and code of practice. I guess one way of doing that is for the Northern Territories to adopt the same guidelines that another state, or perhaps in the US, has adopted, one that's mature, relatively mature for shale development. I'm wondering, do you see that's the way to go, or is there something unique about the Northern Territories that needs to be considered that would make it different?
Yeah. Northern Territory, there's not much drilling has happened in Northern Territory. As compared to US, they have had several thousand number of, or hundred thousands of shale wells. They know what problems could happen. But I believe, like I personally saw these videos coming out from US where they could blow fire from running tap. I believe those issues were already there as well. So if we drill a coal well or a water well a little bit too deep and it intersects coals, it will at certain time, once it has dewater, the gas will come in, and gas is always there. It's when it comes into the gas. So I saw similar kind of videos, like the same snippets plugged into shale gas and CSG as well. I believe adopting something from US might risk in that regard that they may have like I don't know what kind of environment that particular state has in terms of CSG and shale. So they need, over here I believe we are only talking about shale fracking, and I don't think there's much of CSG market anyway at this stage here.
Well, there are guidelines in states like North Dakota and other states that don't have coal seam gas. That are very much shale gas, in Pennsylvania, for instance. So could those guidelines not be used here?
As I said, there's not much drilling has happened up here as compared to North Dakota. We know about geology of North Dakota a lot more than Northern Territory. So we'll have to be very careful in adopting those guidelines straight away. We need to go through them one by one. Again, I haven't gone through those ones myself, so I cannot comment that whether they are good or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I think. Yes, Dr. Jones, thank you.
You made a statement that you're a much greater risk with shallow fracking. Now,
yes.
I've got a number of thoughts going around in my mind about what that might entail, because with shallow fracking you're more likely to be closer to water tables, so mixing and so on. But how about well integrity and things like that? Is it any greater for shallow fracking as opposed to deep shale fracking?
Again, depends what we are calling shallow. If we're calling 300 meter shallow, that's highly, there's a lot of risk in there. If you're calling 1,000 meters as shallow, those risks are mitigatable. There are well integrity practices that we can put in place that monitor those risks, and those risks can be kept to the lowest level.
In terms of the risk of say well blowouts, is that more likely to occur with a deeper well where you've got much greater injection pressures when you're fracking?
Well, the blowouts happen. The shallower blowout is harder to control as compared to a deeper one. The likeliness, I would say, a shallower one with gas and fracked will have a greater chance of blowout rather than a deeper one.
Any other questions? Yes.
Vaughan,
Dr. Vaughan.
just like to get an idea a little bit more on your operations. You spoke about all aspects of drilling and fracking.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have rigs actually operating at the moment?
So we are a well engineering project management company. We monitor those programs and tasks on behalf of the customer, which is most of the time an oil and gas company, such as Northern Territory Gas or BMA, which is BHP Billiton as well. So and the reason I'm giving you two different examples is one is present here in Northern Territory, the other one is in Queensland with the shallow gas wells.
So you are monitoring other operators who are doing the drilling and
Yes.
fracking?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So we have an in-house department of 6 drilling engineers
Yes.
who work in different side of with different operators all the time. And they're contractual engineers and supervisors who are hired to go out onto the site all the time, who work for us on behalf of a client.
Right, okay. I'd be interested to just get your speculation on the sort of the resource base that exists here in Australia to undertake drilling and fracturing, because that's some of the big companies like Chambliss and similar companies. What sort of resources are there and how can that be ramped up over time?
Sorry, I didn't clearly get
Yeah, I'm just
point
trying to
of-
get an indication, an assessment from you of what the resource base is in Australia currently for undertaking drilling and fracturing operations, and how can that be ramped up if it was to be ramped up over time?
I don't believe there's issues with the resources at this stage, considering the oil and gas prices are so low at the moment, or oil prices, I should say. The resources can be moved. There are a lot of resources sitting redundant at the moment in number of fields and number of yards that these companies hold. We basically get called by one or the other company every week to discuss potential opportunities, to assist them with these resources that they have sitting in their several yards to put them on work. So the resources as such are not a problem. In terms of ramping up, it generally takes 2 to 3 months for these companies to move the gear from United States to here or anywhere else.
So would you have any assessment of how many drilling and fracturing rigs there are in Australia at the moment that would be suitable for fracturing shale plays?
There are 4 onshore rigs that I can count on my hands. There's any more than that I'm not sure of.
Right.
Depends on the drilling depths as well, what depths we are looking
Yes.
at. Over here it's about, I would say, something that is capable of reaching 2,500 will cut the mustard. Otherwise it will, we have 4 to 5 rigs that I know of that can reach those depths easily with a bigger casing or heavier casing.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes, Ms. Coram.
I'm just got an inquiry about sort of assuring well integrity, and I'm wondering whether, in your opinion, the requirements for drilling and certification and training are sufficient for the community to have confidence that well integrity will be assured.
That's why I brought in a proposal of having a code of practice where you can stipulate minimum requirements for well integrity. Suppose casing, we have to look at a very micro level just to make sure we cover all aspects of it. Casing integrity depends on the cement. Cement depends on what chemicals have been put in. We need to make sure those chemicals are correct chemicals, and reporting wise, what gets put in is reported as well to make sure the cement is holding the casing as well. So I believe that can be done. The integrity of the wells and assuring the community about the integrity is not going to be an issue. It's just the practices that need to be put in place have to be good integral practices.
Do you think the skills level of the operators is sufficiently assured, though? I agree, I think that's a great suggestion, but it also relies on people, and we need to be confident that the
That's
operators have the right level of skills.
That's correct, yes. I'm not sure what sort of skill levels that state might be proposing to put in place, but most definitely they need to have some sort of skill levels and trainings in place before they get onto the sites, which most of these companies, they actually provide those trainings much more than what they require, and those skills are they do not get, people do not get on sites if they don't have proper skills. I mean, talking about Halliburton, Schlumberger, and all the other, these two are major fracking companies. They all look after, they do keep up with the skills.
Dr. Johnson.
I have a kind of follow-on question from that. We've been talking about regulation and third-party evaluation and things like that. What have been your experiences in Australia on the regulatory side? You may or may not interact with the regulators, but one of the key concerns is in any industry boom, those in the regulatory side who know what they're doing tend to get sucked out with high industry salaries, and you have a deficiency on the regulator side, which is probably not good for anyone. But what's been your experience with the level of regulatory competence? I'll use that term loosely.
I'll give you an example of South Australia. So South Australia, Australian regulator, they maintain a very good structure in terms of the approvals and how they happen. The regulator, we don't feel that they have issues in terms of what you said, that if there's a boom, we have gone through a boom with them. We have seen them approving wells. There's not been any major issues. I believe you have been to South Australia recently as well, and you have seen. I mean, it's not a boom time, but just seeing how the operations take place. I don't believe. I mean, if they do use third parties as well from time to time for their approval processes and reviewing processes. So we have different number of engineers who get seconded into the department to assist them with the approvals.
Just following on from that, one of the issues is with regulatory or third-party independence. Now, you said your company works for quite a few other oil companies. We have a term called Chinese walls operate within financial institutions, which is one part of a company acts on one type of things, which is the third-party approvals, and another part of the company might interact directly with industry. In your organisation, do you have that type of process?
Okay, working for the client as well as the other side of, I understand that issue, and in such cases, most of the times we are not acting on both sides. We have acted in past, but no, I mean they're separate, totally separate people. I mean, end of the day, it comes down to we only second the people in there. They go in, they do their job, they don't even know who the other end is and who they're working for. So it's more about confidentiality to making sure they act independently. Again, as I said, it's not an ideal situation, but because of the amount of resources in the industry, we have to stretch ourselves sometimes. Only at one occasion that I remember that happened.
Dr. Beck?
Follow another question, if I may. Up on your PowerPoint presentation, the third dot point, you've got a list of allowed mud chemicals and fracturing additives. As I understood it, you can correct me if my interpretation is incorrect, that you were looking for some authority like government to provide a list of acceptable chemicals that could be used, and then the drilling and fracturing companies could choose from that list and go ahead and do the work. Is that how I understood your suggestion?
That's right. I mean, as far as what is being used in terms of the government, and the fracking companies do not operate outside of it in the state, and that will look after the community and all the other issues that may arise if they start using the chemicals or their own mixtures without saying what additives they have or what components they have.
Because we have heard from not the drilling and fracturing companies, but I have to hasten to say, but there have been comments that there's a considerable amount of intellectual property attached to the chemicals and additives that are used, and hence the issue of disclosure is a very sensitive one, particularly from that intellectual property perspective. I'd like to get your observations on those apparent sensitivities, given what you've just said in respect of having an open list which companies can select from?
Look, personally, I don't think nowadays anything is so confidential in terms of the IP of these. Well, not the chemicals themselves, as such, their percentages maybe. So what we are talking here is the list of chemicals, what percentages they use. 99.5% of all this is water, and rest is the additives or fracking chemicals. So it's very in a very small proportion, and in that 0.5 or 0.1%, what they use is, as far as they're using something that is allowed by the government, I don't think there will be an issue. IP-wise, I don't believe, nowadays the technology is so advanced that those chemicals can be easily found out what components of different things are there in particular mixture.
Last question. Thank you.
I had a slightly different way of approaching much the same question. Given that we've been told that quite a range of chemicals that are used with different functions in these fracking fluids, and that there are commercial in confidence aspects of the formulations that are used, is there any technical reason why you need to have flexibility in the composition of these fracking fluids? Your implication there is that if you have an allowed list, it could be a relatively small list of chemicals that would be allowed. But do you need, for technical reasons, do you need wider flexibility in what can be used?
Yep. Look, I'm not a fracking chemical expert, but we do have a chemical engineer who I've discussed the same thing with. He did say that different kind of environments do require different kind of chemicals for fracking. Most of the time it's guar gum that is used as the gel in the frackings. We even use the guar gum in ice creams as well. So that holds, and then sand is the propellant. Those kind of things are available everywhere anyway.
Mr. Sharlaf, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you for
Very
the
appreciated.
opportunity.
Thank you.